In our passage this morning, we've got two people, both of whom came to Jesus in fear. In many ways, we couldn't have a more appropriate passage for today. As we approach week 4 of the shutdown, I'm acutely conscious that there might be many people at this time who are living in fear. Fear of the virus, for some, fear of our jobs, for many, fear of the future. And these two people who came to Jesus, yes, they were very different, but they had that same problem, a problem of fear. Let's take the woman first. The woman in our passage. She crept up behind Jesus and touched the hem of his clothes. She'd been suffering from a medical condition. She'd been bleeding for some years. She feared. She feared for her health. We know that because she'd spent all that she had seeking a cure. Think about that. She'd spent all that she had. So she feared for her finances as well. But she'd heard about Jesus. What she'd heard gave her confidence that he was the answer. So she sneaked up behind him in the crowd, believing, trusting, absolutely confident that if she just took hold of even a little bit of his clothing, that she would be healed. So she reached out, she touched, and she was healed. But then Jesus stopped everything. He turned around in the crowd and he asked, "Who touched me?" And he wouldn't give up asking until she came forward. Suddenly, this lady had a third fear. She feared being exposed. In the society in which she lived, a very early society, a medical condition like her caused her to be considered as unclean, somebody who was a social outcast. She was therefore expected never to touch anybody. And therefore it was with trembling that she came out, trembling with fear. Have you ever wondered, whenever you've looked at this passage, why did Jesus make this woman do that? Why did he put her through that ordeal? The answer is simply this. He wanted her to leave that place in peace. He wanted her to leave knowing that she was fully accepted by him. She didn't have to hide away anymore. So Jesus made her go forward in front of the whole crowd and tell her story. It was only when she did that he turned to her and said, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Those words he used, your faith, they can equally well be translated, your faith instead of healed you, your faith has saved you. It's an important principle that we see throughout the New Testament. That is, that when we come openly, publicly, confessing our faith in Jesus, it's then that he heals, that he saves, that he gives us peace. It's then that we find peace with God. One of my favourite verses in the New Testament is Romans 10 verse 9, which simply says this: "If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." Millions of people miss out on that peace that Jesus gives. They miss out because of fear. Fear which so easily debilitates us. Let's make sure that never happens to us.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song. Deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family, and your blood flows through my veins. So I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I am surrounded by the arms of the Father. I am surrounded by songs of deliverance. We've been liberated from our bondage. We're the sons and the daughters. Let us sing our freedom. God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
For Jairus, the other person in our story, that public profession which Jesus had led the woman to wasn't a problem. He'd obviously overcome that barrier. Jairus was a leader of the people, a ruler of the synagogue, someone of real status in Israel. What we see in this passage is that he'd come to Jesus. He'd fallen in front of him at his feet. He'd pleaded with him for help in front of everybody. Can you imagine something like that in our society today? Perhaps one of our leading politicians running up to some sort of teacher at a railway station, falling on his knees in front of him, grasping hold of his hand and crying out, "Help me, I don't know what to do." It would probably cause something of a public reaction. Jairus had overcome the fear of public profession. But sadly, that was not the battle over. What we see in our passage is that men came from his house with the news, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" Devastating news often challenges our faith. In the difficult times in which we're living, it's worth us recognising that. And as we do so, notice Jesus' response. He simply says to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." What he's saying is, keep on believing even when everything looks like it's turning against you. When that news was broken by the men from Jairus' house, Jesus instantly knew that under these circumstances, fear was going to kick back. What we see in our passage is that the call is to each one of us to keep on trusting, no matter how grim our circumstances get. As we do that, what we will see is that Jesus is greater than our fears. I do hope that you're able to join us at one of our Zoom group meetings later on in the week. The details and the links are below this video on our website. It would be lovely to see you all then.